When people imagine Vikings, they often picture fierce warriors with long beards, fur cloaks, and intricate tattoos covering their arms and faces. This image is powerful, romantic, and visually striking. But how much of it is rooted in history? And how much is the creation of modern imagination? The question of whether Vikings actually tattooed their skin is a fascinating one, because it sits at the intersection of archaeology, literature, and cultural mythmaking. The idea of Viking tattoos comes primarily from a single written source. Around the 10th century, an Arab diplomat named Ahmad ibn Fadlan traveled from the Abbasid Caliphate to the lands of the Volga Bulgars. Along the way, he encountered a group of Norse traders, often called Rus in his writings, who were likely of Scandinavian origin. In his account, Ibn Fadlan describes these people in detail, noting their clothing, weapons, customs, and appearance. One of the most intriguing lines in his description states that they were tattooed from the tips of their fingers to their necks, with dark green designs of trees and other figures. This single sentence is the cornerstone of the entire Viking tattoo theory. Historians and enthusiasts have debated it for decades. Some take it as direct evidence that tattoos were indeed part of Norse culture. Others point out that Ibn Fadlan's description is vague, and the term he used could refer not only to inked designs, but also to painted or stained skin. In an era without standardized terminology, the line between tattooing and other forms of body decoration was blurry. We must also remember that Ibn Fadlan was an outsider, looking at a culture vastly different from his own. His account is colored by his personal biases and cultural perceptions. He might have been interpreting what he saw in a way that made sense to him, but not necessarily in a way that matches the reality of Norse customs. It is also possible that the designs he saw were temporary, made from plant-based dyes or mineral pigments, rather than permanent tattoos. Beyond Ibn Fadlan, there is a striking lack of direct evidence for Viking tattoos. Skin does not survive well in archaeological contexts, especially in Scandinavia's relatively acidic soils. Most human remains from the Viking Age are skeletal, with soft tissue long decayed. Without preserved skin, it is nearly impossible to confirm whether tattoos existed. There are a few cases of well-preserved mummies from the far north, but these are usually from different cultures, such as the Sami or Siberian peoples, who were known for their own body art traditions. However, even in the absence of direct physical proof, there are clues. The Norse people had a rich artistic tradition. From carved runestones to decorated weapons and jewelry, they clearly valued intricate designs and symbolism. The patterns found in Viking art spirals, interlacing lines, animals, and mythological scenes would have translated well to the human body. The tools needed for tattooing, such as needles and pigments, were certainly available in their world. Iron needles were common, and plant-based dyes, like woad or soot, could have been used to create permanent marks. There is also the matter of cultural exchange. Vikings were great travelers, reaching as far as Byzantium, the Middle East, and North America. Along their journeys, they would have encountered many cultures with tattooing traditions, from the Celts and Picts in the British Isles to the various peoples of the Eurasian steppes. Tattooing could easily have been adopted or adapted as part of the Norse cultural toolkit. Despite these possibilities, one must be careful not to leap to conclusions. Modern pop culture, particularly television series and movies, has embraced the image of the tattooed Viking because it is visually compelling and aligns with contemporary ideas of warrior identity. Yet historical accuracy is a different matter. The leap from a single ambiguous written account to an entire cultural practice is a big one. The truth is that, as of now, we cannot say with certainty whether tattoos were widespread among Vikings, limited to certain groups, or non-existent. What we can say is that body decoration was likely important in Norse society, whether through tattoos, body paint, or temporary markings for rituals and festivals. Understanding this requires not only looking at the sparse written sources, but also examining the broader cultural context of the Viking Age. If we look beyond the scarce written sources, one way to explore the possibility of Viking tattoos is through the study of their art and symbolism. The Norse worldview was rich with myth, legend, and a deep connection to nature. These elements appeared in nearly every form of decoration they produced, from the ornate carvings on their longships to the intricate patterns on brooches, weapons, and runestones. Such visual language could easily have been adapted for the human body, whether as permanent tattoos or temporary markings. Common motifs in Norse art included interlaced knotwork, serpentine creatures, animals like wolves and ravens, and symbols tied to their gods and cosmology. Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, represented thought and memory. The Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, encircling the world, symbolized the cyclical nature of life and fate. Runes were another powerful element, each with its own name, sound, and meaning. To the Norse, a rune was not simply a letter but a magical symbol, potentially capable of influencing reality. If tattoos were indeed part of their culture, it's easy to imagine a warrior carrying protective runes on his skin, or a seeress marking herself with symbols for visions and insight. One aspect that supports the tattoo theory is the widespread practice of body modification in ancient Europe. Many cultures in proximity to the Vikings engaged in tattooing or scarification. The Picts of what is now Scotland were famously described by Roman writers as painted people, likely referring to body markings that may have been permanent. The Scythians, a nomadic people of the Eurasian steppe, are known from preserved mummies to have worn elaborate tattoos depicting animals and geometric shapes. The Vikings traded with and sometimes fought alongside these groups, so cultural influence was inevitable. Archaeological findings from outside Scandinavia give us tantalizing possibilities. The famous Siberian ice maiden of the Pazyryk culture, buried in the 5th century BCE, had remarkably well-preserved tattoos of deer and other animals, still visible thousands of years later. Although far older than the Viking Age, her existence proves that tattooing was not a rarity in northern Eurasia. If anything, it strengthens the case that Norse people could have shared in such traditions, especially given their mobility and contact with diverse populations. Yet, there is a reason for caution. Many of the most vivid examples of ancient tattoos come from regions with permafrost or extremely dry climates, where skin can survive for millennia. Scandinavia's environment does not favor such preservation. Without direct physical evidence from Viking graves, scholars must rely on indirect arguments, comparisons, and educated speculation. This gap leaves room for doubt, but also for interpretation. And in the absence of proof, imagination tends to fill in the blanks. It is also worth noting the role of ritual and performance in Norse culture. The sagas and poems often describe ceremonies where individuals would adorn themselves elaborately, whether for weddings, funerals, or seasonal festivals. While these accounts focus on clothing, jewelry, and weaponry, it's not hard to envision body art playing a role as well. Paint or temporary markings could have been used for dramatic effect, to show allegiance, or to invoke the favor of the gods. Over time, such practices might have evolved into tattooing, especially if the designs held deep personal or spiritual meaning. The tools required for tattooing were certainly within Viking technological reach. Metal needles, bone awls, and other sharp implements were commonplace. Pigments could be derived from a variety of natural sources: soot from fires, crushed charcoal, iron oxide for reddish tones, or plant-based dyes like woad for deep blue. Whether these pigments were inserted into the skin or merely applied to its surface is the central question. Even without conclusive evidence, the tattooed Viking has become a fixture of modern media. Shows, films, and even video games depict warriors covered in intricate designs that reflect both historical, Norse art, and contemporary tattoo styles. While these portrayals inspire interest in Viking culture, they also risk creating a version of history that is more fantasy than fact. The challenge for historians and archaeologists is to sift through these layers of modern invention to glimpse the truth beneath. In the end, the debate over Viking tattoos is less about finding a definitive yes or no answer, and more about understanding how we construct our images of the past. The appeal of the tattooed Viking lies in the way it bridges the gap between ancient identity and modern aesthetics. It invites us to imagine not just how Vikings looked, but how they expressed themselves, marked their milestones, and carried their beliefs on their very skin. To explore the question further, it helps to consider the social and symbolic role tattoos could have played in Viking society if they existed. The Norse world was deeply hierarchical, but also highly personal in how identity was displayed. Appearance was a statement. Clothing, hairstyle, weapons, and jewelry were not merely practical, but signifiers of status, allegiance, and personal history. If tattoos were part of this visual language, they would have been more than decoration. They would have carried meaning tied to honor, reputation, and the divine. In many ancient cultures, tattoos served as markers of belonging. They could signify membership in a clan, a warrior band, or a religious group. For Vikings, whose society valued loyalty and kinship, permanent markings might have served as a visible reminder of one's role and obligations. A warrior could bear the emblem of his jarl, or the runes, for a god he worshipped, while a seeress might wear symbols connected to her prophecies. Tattoos could also have been talismanic, believed to offer protection in battle or luck in trade. Spiritual belief was an integral part of Norse life, and the line between religion and daily activity was thin. The gods were invoked in everything from voyages to harvests, and rituals often involved symbolic acts. If tattooing had a ritual dimension, it might have been linked to rites of passage, marking the transition from youth to adulthood, or commemorating achievements such as victories at sea or in battle. In this sense, tattoos could have been living records, etched on the body rather than carved in stone. One challenge in confirming such practices is the limited written record from the Viking Age itself. Most Norse writings that survive are from the later medieval period, recorded by Christian scribes in Iceland long after the Viking Age ended. These sagas and chronicles preserve myths and histories, but rarely describe personal appearance in detail except when it serves the plot. If tattoos were common, but not unusual, they might not have been worth noting, just as modern accounts might omit describing someone's hairstyle, unless it was exceptional. Interestingly, certain Old Norse words suggest familiarity with the act of marking the skin. While there is no direct term for tattoo that survives from the Viking Age, there are words for mark, cut, and paint that could encompass a variety of body art forms. This linguistic ambiguity leaves open the possibility that tattooing was simply taken for granted, and thus not distinguished from other forms of adornment in the language. Modern fascination with Viking tattoos says as much about us as it does about them. In contemporary culture, tattoos often symbolize individuality, strength, and rebellion, qualities easily projected onto the image of the Viking. When artists and historians reconstruct Viking appearance for exhibitions or entertainment, the addition of tattoos is an appealing way to bridge historical imagination with modern aesthetics. These designs often borrow from authentic Viking art styles, such as the Ornes, Bore, or Jellinge styles, giving them an air of authenticity, even if the practice itself remains uncertain. The absence of proof has not prevented reconstruction attempts. Some tattoo enthusiasts have looked to runestones, wood carvings, and manuscript illustrations for inspiration, creating designs that they believe could plausibly have been worn by Vikings. While these are speculative, they do serve to highlight the visual continuity between Norse art and modern body art traditions. In this way, the idea of Viking tattoos has evolved into a cultural collaboration across time, one that blends historical fragments with creative interpretation. If future archaeology were to uncover preserved Viking skin with ink markings, it would confirm a long-held belief. Such a discovery is unlikely, but not impossible, especially if a burial site is found under conditions that allow for soft tissue preservation. Until then, the question remains in the realm of educated guesswork, supported by indirect evidence, cross-cultural comparisons, and a single intriguing eyewitness account from over 1,000 years ago. Ultimately, whether Vikings truly tattooed their skin or not, the concept endures because it resonates with the spirit we associate with them. It speaks to ideas of identity, resilience, and connection to one's beliefs, qualities as relevant today as they were in the Viking Age. The image of the tattooed Norseman standing on the prow of a longship or gathered by the fire in a mead hall may be part history and part myth, but it captures something essential about how we remember them, as people who wore their stories proudly in every sense of the word.